Hello, this is Angeli, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time, we were talking about should parents stay together for the sake of the children. And we're gonna, start again on that. In as many as 1 in 5 divorced families, parental conflict continues or escalates. And remember we said it's not good for the kids. If you're fighting all the time, that's not good for you, and it's not good for the kids either, because children learn what they live, and if they see that, they're more likely to act that out in society, which is definitely not good for anyone. 2 years after a divorce, children suffer more from dissension in a divorced family than do children in a non-divorced family. So it affects their behavior, it affects their, faith that things are going to be okay. Oh, excuse me a minute here. Okay, that was my son, and then somebody was at the door, but they didn't stay at the door. They knocked and left. They didn't look like they were up to anything good with their sunglasses and stuff going on, but back to the parental thing. Thus, if conflict is going to continue, children may be better off in an acrimonious two-parent household than if the parents divorce. So, again, if you all can make it work, like I said, there are people who have, but for the most part, if there's a lot of conflict, it's better to stop the conflict. On the other hand, if conflict lessens after a divorce, children may be better off than they were before. And I know that was the case with me and my ex-husband, because there was just so much fighting, and he was trying to exert so much control over me that there was just no way, and over them, that there was just no way we could have a happy home life. So that had to be stopped and changed in order for us to be able to live our own lives and learn some things. Unfortunately, the amount of bickering after a divorce is not always easy to anticipate, because you're going to argue about everything, clothes, shoes for the kids. There's always going to be something, bills, food. To test the theory that children are better off if their parents wait to divorce, one team of researchers examined data from a longitudinal cohort of 11,407 men and women born in England. Oh my. 16% of them reported at age 33 that their parents had been divorced at some point. So, in England, that's only 16%. So that's a much smaller sampling than probably would have been here in America, because our divorce rate here in America, last I looked, was close to 52%. So over half the people who get married here in America end up divorced. It's just crazy. Yeah, this thing here, it wanders. I don't know what that's about, but it does. 2/3 of these divorces had occurred by the time the children were 16. So, by the time they were old enough to drive, the divorce, happened between their parents. Thus, it was possible to compare young adults who had experienced parental divorce as children with those whose parents had divorced after the children were grown, and those whose parents had not divorced at all. The researchers also were able to control for early characteristics of the children, because, if they were trying to see which kids were affected the most by the divorce, if the kid was already, having some problems before the parents started fighting and having divorce, then that didn't play into the effect as much. Despite some differences, men and women who had experienced parental divorce at any age showed similar outcomes in several respects. They tended to exhibit more malaise than those whose parents had remained married. And of course, that falls into the childhood. If the child was happy, you're going to be more well adjusted than if your childhood was not so happy. And children are affected by parents getting divorced. It messes them up emotionally and mentally. So, excuse me. It's going to affect them. By and large, they tended to have lower educational and occupational qualifications and were more likely to be unemployed. They seemed to form cohabitating partnerships earlier and to dissolve them more quickly. So they were more willing to move in with someone and, be in love, but then at the first signs of trouble, they were ready to bail because, that's what they saw growing up. However, early and unwed parenthood were more common among products of early divorce because they're looking for that love that they were, denied or was lacking in their home. So they're pairing up with someone who they think can provide that, and it doesn't always work that way. And then you can have children that you really didn't want, you weren't ready to raise, and that's sad for everybody. In evaluating the effects of divorce, we need to look at particular circumstances because all divorces are not equal. There's abuse in some cases, control, people with narcissistic, sociopathic behaviors, and the other person's like, wow, you were a good actor at first, you seem very charming, and now I see you for who you are, and I'm out of here. Sometimes divorce may improve a child's situation by reducing the amount of conflict within the family, and sometimes not. Because, like I say, once people get divorced, they sometimes still fight with each other. Children's personal characteristics make a difference. Intelligence, socially competent children without serious behavior problems, who have a sense of control over their own lives, can cope better with both parental conflict and divorce. And like I said, my maternal grandmother kind of stepped in when my parents got divorced. Said, I'll help you, I'll take care of the kids. So between the ages of like 6 and 8, we spent a lot of time over there. We spent, weekends, summers over there while my mom worked and went to school. So she was a very authoritative person who would talk to you, explain things to you. And I credit her with basically saving my life, because if she hadn't instilled in me some value and some worth, I probably would have gone ahead with my several, brushes with suicide, because I just felt like I was worthless. I was basically told that I was property. They could do whatever they wanted with. So, having someone good in your life does make all the difference. So if a child whose parents are going through divorce, if a grandparent or aunt or uncle or grandfather, whoever is a good person, steps in and helps the child, that can make all the difference in that child's world. Ongoing contact with both parents is an important factor, and that's if there's not abuse happening. And while the immediate effects of a marital breakup may be traumatic, in the long run, some children may benefit from having learned new coping skills that make them more competent and independent. Because you learn that, your parents aren't perfect. They're people. They make mistakes, and stuff happens in life, and you have to be resilient, and you have to stand back up, get back on your feet, and just move on. As Dory said, just keep swimming. Living in a one-parent family. One-parent families result from divorce or separation, unwed parenthood, or death. And more people are coming up in one-parent families where there's a divorce or a bailout, as I call it. That's kind of a popular thing for some men where, they realize I didn't really want to have a wife and family. Well, tough poo, but they bail and take off, you know. The number of single-parent families in the United States has more than doubled. So, uh, there are fathers who do take care of their children, but most of the time it's the woman who takes on the role of being that one parent, while the man, does his thing. And in nature, if we look at nature, female bears, cougars, things of that nature, once they're done with the man, they run him off because they know he can be a danger to their family, and they raise the children. So I'm not going to say we're like those animals, but there are men who are very aggressive, and there are reasons why women push these men to the curb. I've worked with enough clients and students and things to know there are some people out there who are better off being raised by one person. When rising rates of divorce and of parental parenthood outside of marriage, today 1 child in 4 lives with only one parent. So, a fourth of the kids you see out there is living with one parent. And a child has at least a 50% chance of living with only one parent at some point in their life. So at some point in your life, you got a 50-50 chance of living with only one parent. Although the growth of one-parent families is slowing, in 2000 they comprised almost 1/3, about 31%, of U.S. families with children under age 18, as compared with 13% of all families in 1970. So that's a pretty good jump up of one-parent families. In Canada, the proportion of such families in 1996, the most recent date for which such data are available, because they don't probably do as many studies as we do here in U.S. with the student grants and everything, is get your money for doing a study, was 15%, less than half the current U.S. rate. So in Canada, it's half what we got going on here. So that tells you maybe a little something about the culture, and that in our culture, it's all too easy to get a divorce. You see billboards on every corner. About 1 in 6 single-parent U.S. families is headed by the father. So only 1 in 6, And I used to work with a woman who had 4 children, and she left her husband and her children for another man. He was not even a good-looking man, but he paid her attention. Her husband was busy working hard-working guy, making a lot of money for his family. And she just felt neglected, I guess. So she went off with this other man. Now he ended up marrying another woman who had her own kids, and they had this big blended family. And last I heard, they had done okay. So it's odd when that happens, but there are women out there who are also very immature and selfish and will run off and leave their husband and children for a chance at something better. The number of father-only families has more than quadrupled since 1974, apparently due largely to an increase in the number of fathers having custody after a divorce. And again, the judge is going to look at the ability to take care of the child, the history of the marriage, what's gone on, whether this person is reliable or this person has a drug problem or alcohol problem. So it's more and more that fathers can get custody of their children. In 2000, about 1 in 3 births, up from fewer than 1 in 25 in 1940, was to an unwed mother. And of course, we know back in the day that was a big scandal. Oh my gosh, you're not married and you're having a baby, or send you out to Aunt June's house in the, boondocks, so nobody knows. But now, not that big a deal. Births to single mothers have increased dramatically in many other industrialized countries as well, because, like I said, it's become more socially acceptable that, you don't have to be married to have a baby. However, these data can be misleading because many of these women are in cohabitating situations, some of them with the child's biological father. And, you hear about that too. We're living together, we have a baby, and, they're just not married for one reason or another. They might choose to not be married, or they don't think it's important. 39% of U.S. non-marital births were to cohabitating couples. And there are couples who choose to cohabitate just so they can have a family. That becomes, a thing here. Children in one-parent families tend to do less well socially and educationally than children in two-parent families, partly because one-parent families are more likely to be poor. So again, we go back to socioeconomic status. With one parent, they're more likely to have less money than if there were two people, contributing to the household. Children in one-parent families are more on their own than children living with two parents, because that parent is not always available. They have to work. They have to, do housework and things like that another parent could be helping with if they were there. So they have less time for the kids. They tend to have more household responsibility, more conflict with siblings because of the increased responsibility and the fact that there's no parent there to kind of watch what's going on and put some input in, less family cohesion, and less support, control, or discipline from fathers if it is the father who is absent from the household. So, sometimes the kids are just kind of on their own. Divorced mothers particularly tend to have trouble with school-age sons. However, poor outcomes are far from inevitable. Not only the father's involvement, but also the child's age and level of development, the parent's financial circumstances, whether or not there are frequent moves, and other aspects of the family situation affect how children turn out. Because like I said, everything affects you in some kind of way. Since about 75% of divorced mothers and 80% of divorced fathers remarry, families made up of yours, mine, and ours are common. So step families are now just a fact of life. You might have step brother, sister, half brother, sister, out there. It's just a fact of life now. Step families often start out as cohabitating families when a single parent brings a new partner into the house. It's important to be careful who you let have access to your children. I've heard some pretty bad stories regarding step parents. So, do your due diligence and do a little. You don't have to pay for a background check, but you can certainly Google people and see their social media and see what kind of a person they are, before you get into a relationship with that person. The step family is different from the natural family. It has a larger cast, which may include the relatives of up to 4 adults, the remarried pair plus 1 or 2 former spouses, and it has many stressors, because we have problems sometimes getting along with our own brother and sister, our natural ones, and then you add these other ones to the mix, and there's feelings there. It's like, well, you're not my real one, you're not the real kid, And, so there's going to be some animosity. There's going to be some fighting. That's just a fact of life. And it's up to the parents to step in and, say, hey, you need to get along. This is not okay or whatever. And unfortunately, parents are kind of reticent to do that about children that aren't their biological child, but it takes a village, as the saying goes. So when you're in that situation, you're well within your right to say something. And if you don't feel like you're comfortable saying it to the child, go to your spouse or your person you're living with. Say, hey, this did this, this person did this, and I'm not okay with this. This is not cool. And then y'all work out, like maybe there's a new rule, or have a discussion with the child who did whatever was not that great. A child's loyalties to an absent or dead parent may interfere with forming ties to the step parent. And of course, especially if the parent had passed away, that child's going to feel the need to be loyal. And there are children who are loyal to their abusers for the simple fact they feel like everyone else is siding with the victim and no one's siding with the abuser, and they'll side with the abuser just to feel like they're not jumping on the bandwagon, and they love this person, of course, so they feel like they need to do that because no one else is doing that, and that's a shame, because that is a psychological problem, so unfortunate, but it happens. Adjustment is harder when there are many children, including those from both the man's and the woman's previous marriages, or when a new child is born. And of course, that's where the ours comes in, yours, mine, and ours. And some kids are not okay with that. Some kids, cannot deal with a new kid being added to the mix. I know I have a half sister, and my biological sister was so jealous of her. She sent my father a Christmas card, and it was the exact same Christmas card that my sister had gotten him. So she was so mad, she ripped it off the door and tore it up in pieces and threw it away. And she got in a little bit of trouble with that. And of course, me and my brother, we thought, we were kind of egging her on, like, yeah, do it, And stuff like that happens. So there can be some serious jealousy, so kind of keep an eye on things if you're doing the step family, and make sure that there's not some serious animosity towards the new child. Findings on the impact of remarriage on children are mixed. Some studies have found that boys, who often have more trouble than girls in adjusting to divorce and single-parent living, usually with their mothers, benefit from a stepfather. And we never had a stepfather. I think my mother dated like one man the whole time she was divorced. And I didn't date much. I was very picky for 8 years. I had computer dated some people. There was a couple of guys that was interested, but they were too pushy for my liking. It's like, I have these 3 kids. They're here in my home. I'm not going to let you just come in. I got to get to know you first. We got to become friends. We got to, move on from there, because I've never been in a serious relationship with anyone I wasn't friends with first. And I think that's important. I think your spouse should be your best friend, because you all need to be able to get along, when things come up, and they will come up. A girl, on the other hand, may find the new man in the house a threat to her independence and to her close relationship with her mother, and may be less likely to accept him. And you hear about that quite a bit. In a longitudinal study of a nationally represented sample of U.S. adults, mothers who remarried or formed new cohabitating relationships use less harsh discipline than mothers who remain single, and their children reported better relationships with them. And on the other hand, supervision was greatest in stable single mother families. So a lot of single moms can keep it together and do what they need to do, for the most part. It is estimated that between 1 and 9 million U.S. children have at least one gay or lesbian parent. And that's just kind of become commonplace nowadays. Some gays and lesbians are raising children born of previously heterosexual relationships. Because, like I said, it takes you a few decades to figure out who you are. So you might have grown up trying to fit in a mold that you really weren't meant to fit in. And when you figure that out, you might want to seek relationships closer to what you know that you are now. So yes, I have met people who were in previous heterosexual relationships and are now in gay relationships. So that is also an increasing thing that's happening in society. Others conceive by artificial means, employ surrogate mothers, or adopt children. And that's usually the more common thing, and that's becoming more commonplace, and more courts are willing to allow gays to adopt. Several studies have focused on the personal development of children of gays and lesbians, including physical and emotional health, intelligence, adjustment, sense of self, moral judgment, and social and sexual functioning. A considerable body of research has been indicated that there are no concerns. So a gay couple is not going to have a mentally off, forced gay child. That's just a prejudice that some people have. There is no consistent difference between homosexual and heterosexual parents in terms of emotional health or parenting skills and attitudes. Because if you want to have children, chances are you love your children, and a good parent is going to be a good parent no matter what the situation is. Openly gay or lesbian parents usually have positive relationships with their children, and the children are no more likely than children raised by heterosexual parents to have social or psychological problems. Like I said, you might hear otherwise from some people, but that has more to do with their prejudices than the facts. Children of gays and lesbians are no more likely to be homosexual themselves or to be confused about their gender than are children of heterosexuals. Because, like I say, for the most part, we kind of come up and start knowing what we are at some point. You can, have that. And like I said, everyone goes through a homosexual phase in your preteens or your early teens where you prefer to be around your own sex. And like I said, the other sex to you is yucky, they get cooties, blah, blah. But we outgrow that and are attracted to the opposite sex usually, but not always. And like I said, it might take you a few decades to figure that out. So, this is more of a thing now than it used to be in early society. In one study, the vast majority of adult sons of gay fathers were heterosexual. So, gays raising children are not going to make them gay. Sorry, it's just a prejudice that some people have. Likewise, in a longitudinal study of adult children of lesbians, a large majority identified themselves as heterosexual. So again, the gays aren't making gays. Such findings have social policy implications for legal decisions on custody and visitation disputes, foster care, and adoptions. Because, the law gives them equal rights. And there are people in our government positions nowadays who would like to take those away for one reason or another. But again, hopefully society's smarter than that at this stage. The American Academy of Pediatrics supports legislative and legal efforts to permit a partner in a same-sex couple to adopt the other partner's child so that the children may enjoy the benefits of two parents. And the studies, as we just talked about, have all showed that children do better with two parents in the household. In remote rural areas or villages of Asia, Africa, Oceania, and Central and South America, it is common to see Older girls caring for 3 or 4 younger siblings, feeding, comforting, and toilet training them, disciplining them, assigning chores, and generally keeping an eye on them. And I was dictated that duty. My mother slept during the day because she worked nights, and I was in charge of the younger two. So from age, as early as 6, I was babysitting. And it was not a great situation, and it didn't do much for my self-esteem and things because I was too worried about, am I doing this okay? Am I doing this right? How do I keep them in line so they don't wake her up so I don't get beat because I was the oldest and I knew better. Nothing should have been going on. And that's something that happens. And that's where I'm going to leave you for now. And maybe, hopefully, this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Until next time.